Direct from Foxborough, Massachusetts, the gem of Norfolk County, and taped at the studios of Foxborough Cable Access. It's Foxborough Central, and here's your host, Bob Hickey.
And welcome to another fantastic episode of Foxborough Central. You heard the announcer. I am Bob Hickey. I am your host, and I am glad that you took the time to join me and my friends here at Foxborough Central as we talk about the people, events, and organizations that make Foxborough the gem of Norfolk County. So, speaking of my friends, I'm here with Chris Rappold, who is the owner and head instructor at Personal Best Karate here in Foxborough, Norton, and many other communities.
Yes, sir.
And I'm here with Elizabeth Moen. Elizabeth, nice to meet you, and thank you for joining us here in Foxborough Central.
Thank you.
And if I were to give you a reason why I am here with Chris and Elizabeth, I would look no further than to childhood. How many of us went through childhood and experienced a round of bullying? Or how many of us were the bullies? This is a serious issue and one that I think is under-addressed because it's not a comfortable topic. It's not something we like to talk about. And unless it happens to our child specifically, it's something we like to pretend doesn't exist. But here in Foxborough, it does exist. Recently, a couple stories have come to light that really reinforced the need for knowledge, education, and some direction. And we as adults need to give that direction. We have to have expectations, and we have to have some leadership. So what I've done is I've asked Chris Rappold, who I know is a leader in the anti-bullying campaigns of the past. He has worked in our public schools here, and with Personal Best Karate and their message of discipline and self-control, it is him that I come to talk about anti-bullying. And Elizabeth Moen is a longtime student and instructor here in the Foxborough, also a Foxborough High School graduate herself. And so I thought that these two individuals would be the ones that I would want to talk about bullying, anti-bullying, the causes and the effects on our community. So Chris, with that preamble or that introduction, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So let's talk about bullying. And first of all, let's talk about Personal Best Karate, located here in Foxborough at the Personal Best Plaza on Commercial Street here.
I like how you call it the Personal Best Plaza.
Well, it
Foxborough
is.
Plaza.
That is the business that has been
Yes,
in that place the longest, and
Yes,
so
sir.
I think it deserves top billing.
Thank you, and I appreciate that.
You're
I'll bring
welcome.
that up to the landlord.
There you go. Well, thank you very much. And actually, I say it in seriousness because Personal Best has been a piece of our community now, maybe a stealth piece, but a significant piece of our community now for 20 years, right?
20 years.
Ever since I've been here,
Yes.
Personal Best has been there, and my kids attended. And whenever I've needed a contact or whenever there's been a community event going on that had something to do with karate or even giving, I know that you've been there. So as a friend of the community, I know that also you had developed a program and you taught in our schools, in the elementary schools, the Burrell, the Igo, and the Taylor, a program. And I know you don't do that now, but can we start at the beginning? Let's start at the early stages. And why did you teach it in elementary school, and what did you teach?
Well, I think the overwhelming motivation for the topic of bullying is I've never been a person that likes injustice, and for whatever reason, and I'm sure it bothers everybody, but there's something about it that just really gets to me. And being running a martial arts school, certainly there are some people that bring their children, or they find their way to us because they're actually in fear of like a physical confrontation, but
And so the parents' hope is that it'll be a quick fix, a way to teach a child a way to defend themselves.
Yeah, and while I think that's really important, I think like as a parent, Bob, I think it's important. Like it's our responsibility as parents to teach our child. They don't have to be Olympic swimmers, but they should know how to tread water. They should know how to get to one side of the pool to the other, just as far as safety. I do come from a belief that says, you don't have to be a master or anything like that, but I think everybody should have basic awareness and personal protection skills. I think that's a good thing to have. But jumping right to a physical outlet like martial arts as a way of dealing with bullying isn't really a great solution because, as you probably know, I've heard the statistic, and I believe it's true, 97% of bullying is psychological. It's not physical. So when you look for that physical solution to a 97% problem that's psychological, there's a bit of a mismatch. So I really looked at when, prior to what happened out in South Hadley, which really gained some national attention, but I really looked at us as, if not us in the community, who is going to kind of take that lead? And I really looked at the knowledge and information base that we had amassed over the years of being on the front lines of working with our own students. Mm-hmm. I said, you know what? It's time we come out from the walls of what we're doing and start to share it, with the public and reaching out. And that's when we took on the Foxborough school system, and I'm proud to say we brought that anti-bullying education to 31 schools now.
Wow.
And
so this is an ongoing program.
It is. I still do it to this day. I think my first one was probably about 10 years ago, actually bringing it outside of personal best to a public school.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Wow. So Elizabeth, and thank you again for joining us today. You are currently, you've been an instructor in the past, you've been a student in the past.
Yes.
And you are a 2008 graduate of Foxborough High School. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, let's start at basics, okay? So with going into, how did you first become involved with personal best karate?
Well, it was a family friend of my sister's who had been going to personal best, and she was what we call a SWAT instructor, which is a student instructor. And she had, mentioned it, and I was having trouble in school with controlling myself and my anger. I was of the age, if someone bothered me, I would just push back. Okay. And so my parents were looking for a good way to let that physical, side of me, like a good, safe way for me to get out of me. Yeah, an outlet. Sure. And then also a way to, have some self-control. Because I would fly off at the handle. If someone, angered me, I would throw something or just throw a temper tantrum. Mm-hmm. And going to personal best was the first time I got angry. I believe actually was one of the first times I met Master Rappold, because he taught so many of the schools. I was not having a good day, and he said, the second you tie that belt on, whatever is happening outside, you leave it outside. And it was, I think, one of the first times, not to give my parents, they're great parents, I love them, but it was the first time that someone looked right at me and said, I don't care what kind of day you're having, now you go and you focus. And it was the first time that karate became something that, no matter what was going on during the day, and no matter what a bully had maybe said to me, it just gave you something to focus on. It was that true outlet that it just felt great.
So you, and again, this is an unscripted program, so I'll apologize if I go places I ought not to.
That's okay.
But so you had been bullied in the Foxborough school system. Mm-hmm. And so this is a great message to just put out there, that it does occur, and it occurs no matter the environment, because people are people, children are children, and a lot of it is growing and learning your path, but a lot of it is something that should not happen, should be controlled. And when it happened to you, you didn't really have a way to go to the schools and say, this person was bothering me, and there wasn't a mechanism in place to make them stop. Yeah. So you, sounds like you had to deal with it yourself.
Yeah, and part of that was, it was, a while ago. This would have been 2002, 2003, so it was, fortunately for me, it was before, Facebook, before MySpace, so there was bullying at school, and once I left school, it ended. I wasn't, there's no cell phone, so I was fortunate in that aspect. But I was the youngest of 3 kids, so, obviously there was a little bit of that when he got home, too. So it just was I think because it was a different time, that it was back, you kind of handled things yourself.
Well, it sounds like it was a struggle, but you bring up an excellent point that now the bullying isn't, and you mentioned before, it's not physical, it's 97% psychological, but now with Facebook and Twitter and being able to generate crowds at the drop of a hat, and we read about it in the local papers, about issues that happened. In fact, there's a trial going on now about a serious issue where there was some communication that happened on chatting, and a young man committed suicide. And whether it was encouraged or bullying or however you want to phrase it, the end result was it was something that shouldn't have happened. And had there been an adult knowledgeable, understanding what was going on and able to intervene, the outcome would have, I think we can safely say would have, been significantly different. So to that end, and Elizabeth, I'll stay with you for this one, how did personal best, I don't want to say intercede, but how did personal best change the path that you're on?
Definitely through the self-control, and I think a biggest part of this is, again, like, I love my parents. They're very, very, very supportive parents, but it gives you adults that you can talk to who aren't your parents, and I think that's very important. You know, through Master Mansour, who's the main instructor at the Foxborough School, and Miss Karen, who's the program director, it was two people who were not my parents, so you're always a little bit hesitant, I think, to tell your parents things, but when there's other adults who can give you fantastic advice and, you know, help you along, that is a little bit easier, I think, to talk to an adult who's not your mom or dad. And so I think that was really helpful, that when I was having issues with students, even as I went up into high school, and then even sometimes in college, just because you always meet people who, you know, just like putting other people down for some reason. And it was just great because you could, you know, I've been able to bounce ideas off Master Appold and just being like, you know, sir, you know, this is driving me nuts. And he's always been, take a big breath, just keep going. And so I think that's a huge part, is just having a good voice that you can just listen to. I think the more adults you have around you, the more responsible people around you just to talk to, I think the better. So I think that's been a huge aspect.
That's very, and you had mentioned, when we were doing our pre-interview, you had mentioned that the folks at Personal Best are your second family. And I took that seriously, and because when we're having this type of discussion, and again, I'm with Chris Rappold, who is the owner and head instructor, Master Rappold at Personal Best Karate, and Elizabeth Moen, who is one of the instructors and longtime students and part of that family out of Personal Best. When we're talking about family, you know, the joke goes these days with helicopter parents being overly involved, but no matter how involved we as parents think we are or try to be, there's no way that we can protect our children 24/7. There's no way that we can provide bubble wrap and make sure that the world doesn't intrude upon what we consider to be an idyllic childhood. The world does exist, and there are going to be confrontations and conflicts, and whether it's our kids doing the bullying or whether they're being bullied, we're not going to be there. So it all comes down to how do we educate, teach, and lead and role models. So Chris, let's get into what is it that the message at Personal Best is to students that come in, and maybe we'll use, since Elizabeth's sitting here with us, what was the message that was, not your personal message, but what was well, let's go personal. I mean, you came in and you say that you were, you know, you dealt with things physically, and it probably wasn't getting you where you wanted to go.
It's getting me sent to the principal's office.
I was going to say the principal's office. So what was the message that, and how did the message come about? And the reason I ask this is because we as parents who may be struggling with this with our own families, with our own kids, what I'd like to do is encourage them to hear what you're saying, and so that we know that there's another opportunity to educate and maybe give some confidence.
Sure. You know, I'd like to hit on 2 points. One is, you were talking about just in the topic of bullying. I think part of it, and maybe what ties in with Elizabeth as well, is just personal responsibility. Parents and the adult community, we're very, very quick to look at bullying and say, well, it's a children's problem, and we have to address why are they doing all of that. But before I get into the specifics of, you know, working with the children, I think when I look at adults, I think sometimes we set a very poor example as because the children are learning bullying from somewhere, right? If you take a look at sports teams, you know, well...
Full disclosure before you start, I'm a baseball official and a basketball official, and I'm probably going to agree with you 100%, so hit me with it.
So
maybe I'll learn something
today.
Look,
I've been in, you know, Massachusetts my whole life, so I love the Red Sox, and what goes along with that is that rivalry with the Yankees. Well, you know, you think of some of the slogans out there of where we teach our children, and what we call these professional athletes that just happen to be wearing pinstripes. You look at political elections, and you look at, you know, I mean, the egregious violation of you know, bullying that happens there. But then somehow, some way, you know, adults, we say, well, that, you know, that's that, but why are these children bullying? And so the first place I'd go, and it's kind of a bitter pill for some to swallow, is we got to make sure that we're setting a really, really good example. And the reality is, look, we're all human. I'm at the best version of myself sometimes and the worst. But the reality is I stop and think and I say, look, I have children of my own and I have, people within my organization that are expecting me to act within a code of behavior. And even if somebody's violating, what I perceive as just common sense rules or whatever, I still have to remember there are eyes watching me, and to the best of my ability, not that I'm no more perfect than anybody else, but you got to do that. So now, taking that personal level of responsibility to the children, I start from a framework of not saying, geez, if bullying happens, I say it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Bob, I think it's naive for us to think, and the Foxborough schools, by the way, are great, and I know so many of the teachers and principals, but it's naive to think your child is going to go from kindergarten through 12th grade without running into bullying. Right. So you don't defeat bullying by hoping and praying that the environment is sanitary. You just teach children and teens and adults, when it finds you, this is how you handle it. And we have different frameworks that we teach children and adults that are just very, very practical, and it just gives them, okay, when this happens, this is what you do. When this happens, this is what you do. And that's how you protect yourself from bullying.
So we're here with Chris Rappold and with Elizabeth Moen and talking about bullying in recognition of October being National
Bully Prevention Month.
Bully Prevention Month.
Yes.
So to that end, we've heard about the message that's being sent or should be sent. So right. Elizabeth, what was the message that was received?
The first thing, and it's so simple once you hear it that you're like, huh, why didn't I do this? First one is, just ignore them. And,
Easier said than done.
Yeah. But it was the first time that, I was always the kid that had to have a response to everything. And so the first time was just ignore, just walk away. And it was funny how much that just helped, because if you didn't give the bully something to feed off of, they would be like, oh, well, making fun of them is not fun because I didn't get a rise. And then this, the second time that you did it, it'd be like, hey, can you knock it off? And would be polite to them. That was always my problem, was I wasn't polite. I would, say something, I would fight back, and then again, the bully feeds off of that, and they get energy out of the person, their victim, reacting. And I found when and unfortunately it happens, in college, it happens at work, and if you're just like, hey, can you not, please? And then again, then they're kind of left, kind of gaping of oh, now what do I do? Mm-hmm. And then finally now then you at the last time, if that doesn't work, then you go to someone. And that was the hardest part for me, was going to someone, because I want to be independent. I'm a little person, so I try to puff myself up a little bit. And every single one lesson I learned, it was kind of oh, well, that's why nothing's working, because I'm doing it all wrong. And just finally going to people and asking for help. Foxborough was a great school. I was there, and Mr. Pilch was the principal a long, long time ago, and he was a great principal. And finally, when I asked for help, then it went away, because I was trying to handle it all by myself, not telling anyone something was going on. And teachers can't be there all the time. The Ahern has a huge field. The teachers can't be everywhere. Mm-hmm. And the second I actually said, hey, so-and-so's bothering me, and then something was oh, that's what he meant. And so so just definitely learning those little, the practical, helps.
But isn't that the hardest piece? And I don't know what age you're at when that happened, but that's the hardest thing to teach anybody, including when we're at work. We're having a horrible day, I don't understand. Who do I reach out to just understand this without being made fun of by my boss, without my boss thinking that I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not competent, I'm not able to do this job, they'll get rid of me the next opportunity they have because I just can't do it. So, where do you get the confidence to be able to say, in this team environment, I want to do a better job, I want to make us all successful. How do I do this job better without fear? And we do that as adults on a daily basis. Sure. Almost. And so it's exponentially more difficult as a child who does, and you're an adult now, Elizabeth, and you have the benefit of years experience and having been through the battles, scars to prove it, and having a good support system. So how do we get that support system in place, and what is the first step in doing that, because it's such a problem. And at the same time, the solutions, as you point out, there are systems in place to maybe not prevent completely, but at least to remedy situations when they arise.
Right.
What's the first step?
I think the first step is having somebody that believes in you, even sometimes more than you believe in yourselves. And I think we all need that from time to time. So in the case of Elizabeth, she's giving us an awful lot of credit in her description, but I think one of the keys with her is she needed just somebody else outside of her parental network to believe in her and say, no, this is okay to do. This is what you're supposed to do. Children that, many children, it's, fight or flight. They have those kind of, two extremes, and they don't understand that, oh, no, ignore it the first time. Assume the person's probably having a bad day. Use your words. That's part of it. And it's perfectly fine in that, situation and scenario. If the words aren't working, that's when it's time to report, and it's okay. Sometimes I try to personalize it to the students, and I say to them, look, if somebody was, if I walked out into the parking lot and somebody was breaking into my car, what should I do? Well, I know karate. Should I go up and try to beat up the guy, and then all of a sudden, this happens to me? Should I go up and lecture him? Because that's probably not a good thing. When somebody's usually trying to break into your car, they're not too receptive.
They're not going to stand there and take the lecture. Right?
Yeah. So, I asked the children, what as an adult, what would you expect me to do? Let's call 911. So that's an adult version of reporting. So what we do is in an age-appropriate way, we teach the principles, but these principles that you learn whether you're 5 or 12, or the examples change, but the principles are always going to be the same. So you can really have it for a lifetime.
Okay, so with that, Elizabeth, I guess from the receiving end of this, there's always some aha moment, something that turns the tide, something that makes the light bulb go on. That's the way that works. What was your aha moment?
Oh gosh. My aha moment for how all this worked was, even while I was going to karate and it takes time to work, is, when I was in 8th grade, I had, I was not listening to him. And my response to being bullied was I turned a little bit into the bully. And I think that's very, very common for kids. And my aha moment was when there was an actual physical fight between me and another student. And my best friend at the time reported me. And I remember just thinking, how could you do this? How could you, you were supposed to be my friend. And that was the moment when I was like, oh, I'm kind of going off the chain a little bit. Even my friends are getting a little bit nervous. And that was my kind of the moment when I realized that there were actual real consequences to my actions. And because I think it always takes a moment for anyone to realize something like, you can always say, a kid, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. But until it's all like hypothetical, they might not really listen to you. And it wasn't until I realized that I was actually driving my friends away by my behavior that I was kind of like, ooh, I gotta change. I gotta do something. And I think it's unfortunately more common than not that the kids who are getting bullied try to turn a little bit into it. I think it's one of those options, either fight or flight.
That's a great way of also saying break the cycle, because as we know, the predominant percentage of abusers were abused themselves, and apparently, the mass amount of bullies were themselves bullied, because it's a way to gain power when you feel powerless. And I think that's the victimization of the bully, is that whatever you felt is what you're trying to inflict upon somebody else, so you feel whole. And of course, it doesn't work, does it?
Bob, we go to a great deal of effort. There's always the choice in any situation. You can be either a bully, but bully is temporary power. I'm going to get you immediately to comply with what I'm saying, but then it's evaporating.
It's like a drug. You have to do more and more.
Absolutely, but what's more sustainable than being a bully is a buddy. And so we go to a great length to in teaching the children leadership and communication skills and how to do that so that they have the ability to grow a network of people that care about them and reciprocate that friendship. You know, so when children are brought up in an environment that supports that, they start to look at bullying behavior, and all of a sudden what was perhaps normal to them, and well, that's just what you do, all of a sudden they're looking at it and you know, they might start to be a little bit ashamed of it. So we make it stand out. So the choice, bully or buddy, yeah, buddy is sustainable.
I'm here with Chris Rappold, who is the owner of Personal Best Karate, and I'm going to ask him for membership information in a minute, but I want to remind you folks that October is National Bully Prevention Month, and it's a great time to have that conversation with your child. They might surprise you with what's going on, because although we think we know, I've come to find out as a parent that I don't really know a lot. So, Chris, what does October Bully Prevention Month mean?
Yeah, you know, I think it's an opportunity in the calendar year where our schools, our whole organization, we really focus on that topic from A to Z, and we want to make sure that we're imparting all of the messages and skills and really giving just everybody a good brush up on, you know, how to avoid those situations, and if and when those situations find their way, how to deal with it in a non-violent way to be able to do that. So I think that's important. And then also what we do is we seek to go out into the community and, you know, reinforce those things. We'll be posting, you know, videos on Facebook and such, just to you know, help parents and give everybody a little refresher. Doing programs like this, I think, is good. I think, you know, it's, you know, Personal Best needs to play their part in the community. The schools certainly play their part in the community. And then, you know, I go back to it, the adults, you know, in the community.
We gotta do our part.
And you know, look, 80%, 90% of them do. But, you know, some of that 10% out there, we have to remember, you know, children weren't birthed understanding how to bully. It's a learned behavior. It's a learned behavior, and we all need to bear the responsibility of that. Make sure that we're not doing that, and then, you know, bring to the attention when we see somebody else doing it.
Chris Rappold, of course, teaches in many area schools. Foxborough has their own anti-bullying program, which is effective, and I know that if you want more information about that, you can talk to your local school. Chris Rappold, as the owner of Personal Best, you're not going to say it, but I will say it, Personal Best is a wonderful resource, and if you out there in the community think that Personal Best is speaking to you and that perhaps some of their message of discipline, control, and confidence is something that would benefit you and your family, I would encourage you to reach out to Chris. You can always friend him on Facebook. I friend him, that's how I get in touch with him. But you can also log on to the website, www.personalbestkarate.com, or you can call their studio here in Foxborough at 508-543-1858, or I imagine you can just stop in while you're over. Maybe you'll see Chris or Elizabeth. I'm going to give you the last word today because I'm very impressed, and I want to thank you so much for sharing your story a bit.
Thank you very much.
I know there's much more, but we are so out of time. I only have 1 minute left, so I'm going to give you the last word. What I'm going to ask you is if you were able to talk to a 7-year-old, 6-year-old child who is being victimized or is being bullied, what is the message you would want to share with them, speaking as someone who's been through the battles, has the scars, and is now a leader and knows what they're talking about?
I would tell them that they are not alone, that there's always someone who can help them and pick them up, dust them off. That's what I would say. If that little 7-year-old me, it was just, you're not alone. There's always going to be someone there to help you if you need it. I think that's what they need to hear.
Have a good day, Foxborough.